Natasha and Her Illegitimate Child in a Muslim Society. A novel by Dr. A. Ahmed. Book 1. This is an intriguing epic story which resonates with love, resilience, courage, and sacrifice. Before we dive into the tapestry of the story, I would like to inform the reader this novel is narrated in 2 books. Copyrights. All rights are reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means without the prior written permission of the author, except by a reviewer, who may quote brief paragraphs for a review to be printed in a public newspaper, general magazine, school journal, or university article. This novel is a work of fiction, but the entire story is based on the real life of a Muslim family. All names, characters, places, and events are either the product of the author's imagination or used literary. Therefore, any resemblance to real people, living or dead, events or locales is merely coincidental. Chapter 34. The Wedding Day. The reconciliation and engagement of the lovers, Natasha and Wahid, have been received with so much disapproval and resentment by all Muslim families in Calgary City. When those families came to know that Natasha has been engaged to the so-called adulterer, apostate, and impostor Sudanese priest, their anger is heated against her grandfather Dr. Shams al-Din. Some of the Sudanese came and confronted him in his apartment. They accused him of being a weak Sudanese guardian and not a true Muslim grandfather. Dr. Shams al-Din ignored their accusations and continued to support his granddaughter and her fiancé. After the reconciliation of the lovers and their engagement, the wedding date of Pastor Wahid and Natasha is fixed. The wedding ceremony is scheduled to take place in the English Church of Pastor Wahid, but for the reception, the lovers booked a big auditorium in the Apostolic Church. Dr. Shams al-Din family and Pastor Wahid invited many guests for the wedding. Pastor Wahid invited every Sudanese and Arab family he knew in Calgary. Moreover, he invited many professors and students from his Bible college. Even the principal of the college and his family have been invited to the wedding. Natasha has also invited all her friends and classmates. Dr. Shams al-Din invited many guests, including non-Sudanese. He did not allow his granddaughter and her fiancé to invite any Muslim man or Muslim woman for their wedding. He checked the list of all the people who are to be invited before approving it. He told the people who are supposed to welcome the guests that no one should be allowed inside the reception hall if he does not have his invitation card. It has been mentioned in the invitation card that if anyone invited and does not show the invitation card on his arrival, he would not be allowed inside the hall. Dr. Shams al-Din is worried that the Muslims might try to come and create a problem for the couple. For that reason, he made sure that not a single Muslim is to attend the wedding of his beloved granddaughter who became Christian and fell in love with an apostate Sudanese pastor. On the wedding day, the people who attended the marriage ceremony were fewer in number as compared to those who came for the reception. There are over 500 invitation cards that have been sent by mail to the guests. But there were less than 200 people who attended the wedding ceremony. The wedding ceremony took place at 4 o'clock in the evening, and the reception celebration is scheduled to take place at 6 o'clock. The wedding day is the happiest day for Dr. Shams al-Din when he saw his beloved child Natasha standing on the platform with her fiancé, and both are making their everlasting sacred marriage vow for one another. Natasha is wearing the wedding gown that made her appear as an angel before her grandfather's vision. His eyes are suddenly flooded with tears when he remembers his wife Nadia Alexandrov and their beloved daughter Natasha, who did not live long enough to see such a special day. After the lovers have said their Christian marriage vow, the pastor of the church declared them as husband and wife and asked the groom to kiss his bride. It is the happiest time for the lovers when they kiss each other on the lips for the first time in front of many people. From the church, Natasha returned to her apartment with her groom to change her wedding gown and put on her reception dress. Her groom, too, is supposed to change his wedding suit and put on a different suit. While the bride and the groom were away, Dr. Shams al-Din rushed to the Apostolic Church to welcome the guests. It is a huge responsibility for him, but he is gladly shouldering it. There are some volunteers helping him. Most of them are Sudanese and Egyptian Christian girls. Dr. Shams al-Din arrived in the hall before any guest showed up. He repeated his warning to the volunteers that no one should be allowed inside the hall if he or she does not produce his or her invitation card. It was 5:30 p.m. when Dr. Shams al-Din reached the hall of the Apostolic Church. It is a spacious hall that could accommodate up to 500 guests. But the number of people who received the invitation cards according to the list are 530. To avoid sending some guests back, Dr. Shams al-Din and the volunteers added a new row of 40 seats at the front of the stage. As soon as that task was over, the guests began to show up. It is expected that by 6:30 p.m., all the guests will arrive. Shortly after the guests' arrival, the groom and his bride are supposed to reach the reception hall. The dinner would be served as soon as the newly wedded couple occupied their thrones on the stage. The guests have been informed that they can meet and wish the couple their congratulations and give their wedding gifts before, during, or after their dinner. Everything went as scheduled. By 6:40 p.m., the spacious hall had been filled to its capacity. Every seat has been occupied. A young woman from the volunteers announced that the bride and the groom are on their way to the reception hall. In the meantime, Dr. Shams al-Din is everywhere in the hall. He is trying to make sure that everything is ready and looked after. While he is moving from one place to another in that spacious hall, a young volunteer Christian Sudanese girl who is originally from the south of Sudan approached him and whispered a few words in his ears. She informed him that 2 guests arrived inside the hall with their invitation cards, but they are Muslims. Dr. Shams al-Din is extremely shocked and got exceedingly annoyed with the volunteers who are welcoming the guests at the entrance. He remembered very well that the invitation list did not include any Muslim. How then those 2 Muslim intruders obtained the invitation cards without his knowledge? Therefore, he asked that girl to show him where those 2 Muslim guests are sitting. When the girl pointed out the place where the 2 guests were seated, Dr. Shams al-Din's suspicion was confirmed. The 2 guests are Sudanese Muslims. He has recognized them from their Islamic galabayas and huge white turbans. Their long beards and angry faces have revealed to him that they have come to mourn and participate in funeral procession rather than to celebrate and rejoice in happy marriage reception. So, when he beheld those 2 Muslim men sitting amid the guests, like 2 angels of death, he immediately dialed 911. He informed the police about those 2 suspicious guests. The police told him he should not try to approach them or ask them to leave until the cops arrived in the hall. As soon as Dr. Shams al-Din ended his call to the police, he dialed the cell phone number of his son-in-law Pastor Wahid. At that moment, the newly wedded couple are on their way to the hall. Their car is just a couple of blocks away from the Apostolic Church. Dr. Shams al-Din informed Pastor Wahid to ask the driver to pull aside and never move the car until he receives another call from him. It is a hired limousine long car. As his father-in-law had instructed him, Pastor Wahid requested the driver of that beautiful car to pull aside and stop his limousine car until he tells him when to move again. Meanwhile, a fleet of many police cars and ambulances and fire trucks arrived shortly after that urgent phone call, along with the bomb squad. More than 20 cops rushed inside the church hall and ordered all the 500 guests to remain seated in their seats. Dr. Shams al-Din approached the police and pointed them to the place where the 2 suspected men are sitting. As soon as the 2 Sudanese men saw that the cops are coming towards them, the guests felt as if the earth erupted into a powerful volcanic explosion, or a supernova exploded inside the huge auditorium. Some people have been blown up from their seats and their bodies hit the roof of the hall, and then their bodies' parts have scattered under the huge flames and smoke of the powerful bombs. The children have been torn apart from their parents, and their exploded bodies melted on the air and sprinkled everywhere like hot acid. Likewise, the bombs ripped off the women's bodies like cotton out of their mattresses and burned them in the air before they fell to the ground. In the twinkling of an eye, that joyful wedding atmosphere changed into a chaotic scene. The powerful bombs turn the spacious hall into a mass grave where every part of the human organ is buried in it. 530 men, women, and children are brutally murdered and buried in that hall. The 20 police officers have been killed too. Not a single being survived that mass slaughter. It is too horrific and graphic to describe the conditions in which the bodies of those human beings have been found scattered in pieces. When the hall has been excavated a couple of hours later to exhume the bodies of those innocent victims, not a single body is found intact or alive. Chapter 35. The Primary Investigations. Neither the city of Calgary nor any city in Canada had ever witnessed such a cowardly terrorist attack before. The breaking news has assaulted the people like a heart attack and has made every ear numb. Who could think of murdering 550 innocent people on a wedding day? Most of the past terrorist attacks were directed against public places where many people gathered. But this attack seemed to have been carefully planned and the victims were specifically selected. The person who masterminded the attack most probably is a bitter enemy of the groom, or the bride's family, or a person who did not want such a marriage to take place. That is the first clue the police authorities began to work on to identify the murderers of the innocent victims of the Apostolic Church Hall. The only two people who escaped that attack are the bride and the groom. If they were the prime targets of the terrorists, how did they manage to escape and many innocent people were slain in their place? There are two answers and two possibilities for their escape. The first answer, as Pastor Wahid mentioned in his statement, is that they had been prevented from the attack by the phone call of the bride's grandfather, which instructed them to pull aside their limousine car and wait until they receive another call from him. But this possibility has some missing explanation. Why Dr. Shams al-Din called Pastor Wahid's cell phone and not Natasha's cell phone? This missing explanation led the police to think of a second answer. Pastor Wahid knew what was going to happen shortly in the reception hall and hence stopped the car on its way to the Apostolic Church to escape the attack along with his bride. In that case, he didn't receive a call from the late Dr. Shams al-Din. He might have conspired with someone and told him to phone him at that time. The two possibilities led the police to two suspects. The first suspect is Pastor Wahid Muhammad Ahmed, and the second one is Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din. But when the terrorist attack took place, the second suspect happened to be out of Canada. He flew a week prior to the attack to Asmara, the capital of Eritrea. However, his absence did not lead the police authority to rule out the possibility of him being the mastermind of that cowardly terrorist attack. When the police weighed out the two possibilities, it appeared that there is more evidence against Pastor Wahid than Sheikh Yasser. First, the cell phone of Pastor Wahid did not show a record of the number of Dr. Shams al-Din's phone call a few minutes prior to the attack. Both cell phones were operating on phone cards, and the police could not be able to trace any future billings for either phone. This is the strongest piece of evidence the police are holding against Pastor Wahid. Secondly, the police found it difficult to believe that a loving grandfather like the late Dr. Shams al-Din would ignore his beloved granddaughter Natasha at such a critical moment and think of calling her groom instead. The bride Natasha was holding her cell phone in her hand at the time her groom claimed to have received a call from her grandfather. Thirdly, the police found many reasons to lead Pastor Wahid of thinking to take revenge on Natasha's grandfather and those Christians who attended his wedding. First, he was subjected to public disgrace and lost his position in the church because Natasha's grandfather confronted him in front of his congregation and reproached him of having committed adultery with his granddaughter and made her pregnant without the sanctity of marriage. As a result, he was forced to step down, deprived of his ministry in the church, and kicked out of his position as a director for the group of Campus Crusade. The impact of such public disgrace and humiliation led him to make an attempt to kill himself. Secondly, Pastor Wahid had been rejected and despised by his own sheep of the Sudanese and Arabic churches. As a consequence of such a harsh reaction of his former church's members might have driven him to the desperate state of seeking revenge on them. Thirdly, the police found in the diary of Natasha's grandfather's negative remarks about Pastor Wahid. The grandfather accused Pastor Wahid of lying about his place of birth, his family, and the college where he claimed to have begun his university study in Sudan. In his diary, Dr. Shams al-Din raised serious doubts about the claim of Pastor Wahid. He was born and brought up as a Muslim and then converted to Christianity. The police concluded that those doubts most probably led Natasha's grandfather to oppose her love affair with Pastor Wahid and discouraged her marriage with such a liar religious leader. Accordingly, Pastor Wahid Muhammad Ahmed was placed under arrest as a prime suspect on the terrorist attack on the Apostolic Church. When the second suspect returned from Asmara, he was called in for questioning. Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din is accused of being a bitter enemy to Pastor Wahid and tried a couple of times to harm him. In the first attempt, he took him to court and accused him of providing a platform for a hate speech against Islam and Muslims. At the second attempt, he is allegedly behind the malicious rumor, which ultimately led to the destruction of the Christian ministry of Pastor Wahid. Neither Natasha nor the diary of her late grandfather could provide solid proof against the second accusation. When the police questioned the Christian couple, who is allegedly behind the malicious rumor that jeopardized the life of Pastor Wahid, Majak and Malaika denied their involvement. After questioning Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din, the police of Calgary did not find any reason to detain him. After those primary investigations, the police began to look for the identities of the Muslim suicide bombers who executed the attack. The explosive bombs did not leave any identifiable parts of their bodies or clothes to help the police conduct DNA tests on them. Then the police began to look for any missing Muslim among the Sudanese Muslim community in Calgary. The inquiries did not reveal any missing Muslim man in the city. Moreover, there is no report or complaint of missing two Muslims by any Muslim neighbors or property owners in the city. There are no driver's license or social insurance numbers found in any of the cars that were parked in the streets on the wedding day. It seemed that those two Muslim terrorists did not exist. Yet, another lead that the police are working on is the two invitation cards. The police could be able to find a copy of the list of all invited guests in the apartment of Dr. Shams al-Din and Natasha. Out of the 530 invited guests who were reported dead or missing, 2 are still alive. Those 2 guests are none other than the 2 newly arrived Majak and Malaika. It is surprising for the investigators to find that those 2 Christians are included in the invitation list. When the police asked that question to Natasha, she said it is her husband Pastor Wahid who insisted on inviting those 2 Christians. Pastor Wahid answered that question by saying that as a spiritual leader and man of God, he decided to show a forgiving heart to those who maliciously spread false rumor against him. Even so, that discovery began to solve some riddles in that mysterious terrorist attack. When they are questioned about the reason that led them not to attend the wedding, the couple said they had destroyed their invitation cards as soon as they received them in the mail. The police rejected such a claim because the couple's car was found among the damaged cars in the parking lot of the Apostolic Church on the night of the attack. That pointed to the undeniable fact that the couple arrived in the church, parked their car in the parking lot, and then disappeared. When they had been pressed on this piece of evidence, Majak and Malaika claimed that their car had been stolen that evening. The couple had no proof that they filed a complaint and reported the theft of their stolen car to the police authority. From that piece of evidence, the police concluded that the 2 terrorists who blew their bodies in smithereens used Majak and Malaika's car to enter the parking lot of the Apostolic Church. In addition, the police suspected that the 2 suicidal bombers used the same couple's invitation cards to enter the reception hall. Yet, another piece of evidence that the couple could not be able to justify is the $50,000 cash that found hidden inside their apartment. Majak and Malaika are also detained under the charges of conspiring with the Islamic terrorists in committing mass murder. Accordingly, the Calgary police began to work on the assumption that someone had approached the Christian couple and bribed them to sell their invitation cards and lend their car to the 2 Islamic terrorists. After being confronted with that undeniable evidence, the couple admitted their involvement in the terrorist attack. They confessed that a Muslim woman from the Sudanese community in Calgary approached them and proposed to pay 50,000 Canadian dollars if they agreed to participate in the plot. They named that woman as Sarah bint Shakir, the wife of Jabir Hazib Allah. When they agreed to join the plot, Sarah explained to them that their role is to lend their car and invitation cards to the two Muslim men. At first, Majak and Malaika agreed to sell their invitation cards to her, but they were hesitant to involve their car in the terrorist attack. They anticipated that their car would be strong evidence against them. Sarah insisted on the car because there was a rumor circulated among the Muslim Sudanese prior to the wedding that Dr. Shams al-Din obtained the car number of every guest he invited for the marriage of his granddaughter. Also, no one would be allowed inside the church if he would not show his car's plate number, and prior to his admission inside the reception hall, he must produce his invitation card. After she had been arrested and questioned by the police, Sarah dragged her husband with her. Jabir Hazib Allah also admitted his involvement in the attack, but he denied being the mastermind of the plot. He claimed that he had been bribed too. He could not prove who bribed him or who masterminded the entire terrorist plan. Further investigation revealed that the two terrorists were living in the house of Jabir and Sarah. The police could be able to obtain that information from the Canadian neighbors of the Muslim couple. When Sarah and her husband Jabir have been confronted with that undeniable evidence, they confess that they harbored the terrorists in their house until the suicidal operation was executed. They further confessed that the two Muslim terrorists were temporary visitors to Canada. They are Eritrean nationals and arrived from Asmara to Calgary on tourist visas. Jabir admitted that he received the two Eritrean terrorists at the Calgary International Airport and kept them in his house. After gathering those strong pieces of evidence, the police began to work on the questions of who sent those terrorists to Canada and ordered them to carry that cowardly terrorist attack on the wedding of Natasha and Pastor Wahid, and why Jabir and his wife Sarah sheltered those terrorists in their house. The answer to the first question is problematic because Jabir is originally a Sudanese national, but his wife Sarah was born and brought up in Eritrea. Jabir said that the two terrorists are related to his wife, and they came all the way from Eritrea to Canada for that terrorist attack. Neither he nor his wife knew who instructed the terrorists in that plan and sent them to Calgary to execute it. No matter how hard the police tried to push the investigations beyond Jabir and Sarah, they could not succeed. The only information the police are able to gather about the identities of the suicidal bombers is that they are Eritreans who arrived in Canada on 6 months visiting visas. Their names are Abdulaziz Mahmoud Hossein, 22 years old, and Abdulgader Ibrahim Yassin, 19 years old. Chapter 36. New developments in the terrorist case. The arrest of Jabir and Sarah and the identification of the terrorists cleared Pastor Wahid from the charges and led to his release. Instead, the police focused on Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din and began to investigate his recent trip to Eritrea. Sheikh Yasser vehemently denied any involvement in the terrorist attack and claimed that it is a mere coincidence that the terrorists happened to be from the same country he visited shortly before the attack. The Calgary police referred the case to the Asmara police and demanded a record of Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din's visits to Eritrea. The inquiries in the overseas traveling activities of Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din revealed that he often frequents his visits to 3 countries, Eritrea, Nigeria, and Egypt. Then the RCMP police contacted the police authorities of those 3 countries and demanded full reports on his visits. The Egyptian, Eritrean, and Nigerian police authorities supplied bits of intelligence to show the reasons that led Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din to frequent his visits to those 3 countries. Instead of obtaining terrorist activities, the Calgary police stumbled on something profoundly serious about Sheikh Yasser. According to the police investigations of those foreign countries, Sheikh Yasser has other 3 wives in those countries besides his wife in Canada. In Cairo, he has a villa in the most opulent neighborhood and a wife by the name of Labna Abdulaziz, 18 years old. In Lagos, he has in the most ostentatiously rich and lavish locality a wife by the name of Hafsa Amadou, 16 years old. In Asmara, he has a wife called Zara Mahmood Hussein, 14 years old. In Calgary, he has in southwest part of the city a mansion and a beautiful Pakistani wife by the name of Shamim Siddiqui, the daughter of the Imam of the biggest mosque. She is 30 years old. His Eritrean wife was 12 years old when he married her and consummated his marriage with her. The name of one of the two terrorists revealed that Sheikh Yasser's Eritrean wife has the same father and last name as his. This showed that one of the two terrorists is the brother of Sheikh Yasser's wife. But when the Canadian police wanted to establish the link between Sheikh Yasser and the terrorist, the Eritrean police could not supply a clear relationship between the two names. The insurmountable problem arose from the fact that in Asmara, the female's birth and her name is not registered in any governmental department. Every child in Eritrea is born in the house by the assistance of a midwife. The parents are required by law to register their male's birth and name at the statistical department. No female is required to be registered. The majority of Eritrean families never bother to register the births of their sons. Accordingly, the Eritrean police could not be able to establish any blood relation between Sheikh Yasser's wife and that terrorist. The overseas records of Sheikh Yasser in Eritrea led the police of Calgary to stumble upon serious issues and bring him to justice again. Sheikh Yasser is already a convicted sex offender and child abuser. Many years ago, the criminal court in Calgary sentenced him to 15 years imprisonment. But he was released on parole after serving 8 years. He promised that he would never come near any child again. By marrying a 12-year-old Eritrean underage girl, he broke that promise and must be charged again with kidnapping, raping, imprisoning, and impregnating a child. According to the Eritrean Islamic Sharia law, what Sheikh Yasser did in Asmara is not a crime. The law in that country allows the girl to be given in marriage as young as the age of 9. Some Eritrean immigrants arrived in Canada with wives who are 14 and 15 years old, and no one prosecuted them. If the law in Canada would hold Sheikh Yasser guilty of marrying and sleeping with his 12-year-old wife in Eritrea, then many immigrants from Africa and the Middle East should be brought to justice. It is the same line of defense the Muslim lawyer of Sheikh Yasser used many years ago to clear him from the charges of having 4 wives at the same time. His other 3 marriages are lawful in Egypt, Nigeria, and Eritrea. Sheikh Yasser would be guilty of those charges only if he conducted those marriages in Canada or any other country which forbids polygamy. The lawyer referred to the trial of his client that took place 20 years ago. During his trial, the court was aware that he had 3 Sudanese wives by the name of Badriya, Daria, and Maria. His relationship with his first and second wives is lawful in Sudan. Despite the knowledge of the court about those other marriages, Sheikh Yasser was still not charged with any criminal act. Accordingly, the Calgary court could not be able to condemn Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din for having 4 wives at the same time. Likewise, his marriage of the underage Eritrean 12-year-old girl is considered similar to his marriage of his first 14-year-old Sudanese wife Badriya. The Criminal Court of Calgary didn't hold him guilty of marrying in Sudan an underage girl and having 2 children with her. Even the Canadian court came to know he had sex and impregnated without the sanctity of marriage a 14-year girl by the name of Natasha. To protect him from being stoned to death, the Canadian embassy smuggled him over from Cairo to Calgary and sheltered him as a persecuted refugee. On the analogies of his former relationship with the 2 underage Sudanese girls, Badriya and Natasha, the notorious child abuser has been exonerated of the charge of kidnapping, raping, and imprisoning his 12-year-old Eritrean underage wife. At any rate, the Calgary Criminal Court issued a statement that all his children born overseas are entitled to apply for child support from their wealthy Canadian father. After the charges of violating his conditions of release are dropped, the police returned to the case of the terrorist attack on the Apostolic Church Hall, which resulted in the death of 550 innocent people. The case of the terrorist attack seemed to have been stuck on the insurmountable problem of establishing the link between the Eritrean wife of Sheikh Yasser and one of the terrorists who happened to share the same father and last name with her. Since that link is not established, the police could not be able to keep Sheikh Yasser under arrest, and therefore they let him go. Meanwhile, the police of Calgary could be able to obtain an order from the court to detain Sheikh Yasser in Canada until the case of the terrorist attack is solved. He is asked to surrender his passport to the police of Calgary until further notice. After the notorious polygamist and child abuser, Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din has been officially placed under house arrest in Calgary by the order of the criminal court. The media wrote extensively about his past criminal records in Sudan and Canada, as well as his recent records in those three countries where he has 3 Muslim wives. An old article from the archive was pulled out and published in 2 pages in one of the widely read newspapers in Calgary. The article is dated 20 years ago. The article mentioned in detail the adultery charges that were laid on Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din and made the Sharia court in Khartoum to condemn him as guilty of committing adultery twice with a young woman by the name of Natasha Sami Shams al-Din. The first adultery was committed against Natasha when she was 14 years old, and the second took place when she reached 16 years of age. In both cases, Natasha was impregnated by Sheikh Yasser without the sanctity of the marriage bond. She had delivered 2 illegitimate babies. For that reason, Natasha was arrested by the police of Khartoum for twice committing fornication and giving birth to 2 Awlad Haram, or illegal children. The Khartoum Sharia court sentenced Natasha to 200 lashes and Sheikh Yasser to be stoned to death. Somehow, Sheikh Yasser managed to escape out of Sudan and fled to Egypt and finally made his way to Canada and got resettled in Calgary as a persecuted refugee. The Sharia court allowed Natasha to deliver her second baby before she received the 200 lashes. Natasha's mother, Nadia Alexandrov, was murdered by her husband's cousins when she tried to save her daughter from being subjected to honor killing for committing adultery. The court allowed Natasha's father to claim custody of her baby girl. Then Natasha was subjected to brutal execution by being scourged by 200 lashes. Natasha died during that barbaric and cruel scourging. Her infant daughter had been taken by her grandfather Sami Shams al-Din out of Sudan, and both immigrated to Ethiopia and settled in Addis Ababa. Chapter 37. The Unpleasant Discovery. The above 20-year-old article has accidentally fallen in the hands of Natasha, the wife of Pastor Wahid, and has turned her life upside down. All of a sudden, her days and nights have become an unbearable living hell. She couldn't believe that those details were just coincidence. It could not be possible all those names have just coincided with her family's names. The same mother's name, Natasha, grandfather's name, Sami Shams al-Din, grandmother's name, Nadia Alexandrov, the same city's name where she was born in Sudan, Khartoum, and the same city's name in Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, where she spent her childhood until she became 15 years old and then immigrated with her grandpa to Canada. The article stated that the grandfather, Sami Shams al-Din, took his granddaughter and settled in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Natasha knows her late grandfather's first name is Sami, but since he came to Canada, no one referred to him by that name. People used his family name and addressed him always as Dr. Shams al-Din. Natasha wept bitterly when she came to know that her mother and grandmother were subjected to that cruel death for small mistakes committed by her mother, Natasha. She is filled with great indignation when she understands that the cause of all her family's tragedy is Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din. At the same time, Natasha arrived at the unavoidable conclusion that her biological father is none other than the despicable and devil-incarnate man Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din, who murdered her beloved grandfather and caused the brutal murders of her mother and grandmother too. Therefore, Natasha understood why there is not a single photo of her father in her family's album. Also, she knew why her late grandfather always avoided talking about her father, and why he always looked on Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din as a bitter enemy to his family. She now began to hate him with bitterness when she understood that he is the prime suspect of the cowardly terrorist attack on her wedding night that deprived her of her beloved grandfather and killed many innocent people. After that terrible night, Natasha's life turned into hell. She lost her beloved and dearest grandfather on the day, which was supposed to be the happiest day in her life. For many years, her grandfather waited for that happy day to come, and when finally it came, her wicked father turned it into the darkest day in her life. He didn't allow her loving grandfather to live and see his granddaughter a married girl and see her having her own progeny. He turned her happiness into sadness and her wedding into a disaster. Her own father, Yasser, deprived her of her mother, Natasha, her grandmother, Nadia, and her grandfather, Sammy. Natasha shared her unpleasant discovery with her husband, Pastor Wahid. It was also shocking news and an unpleasant discovery for him. He wished that his beloved wife had never come to know that such a wicked and notorious criminal was her father. He advised her never to reveal such an awful discovery to anyone else. According to him, it is a great shame for his wife to be associated with that abuser of children, notorious polygamist, and Islamic terrorist. Pastor Wahid is 100% sure that the wicked sheikh is behind the terrorist attack on their wedding night. He explained to Natasha that Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din tried through the law and social gossip to destroy him and stop him from marrying a Muslim girl who became an apostate like him. When all his wicked means failed, he resorted to the use of violence. His prime targets on that black night were to kill Pastor Wahid, Natasha, and Dr. Shams al-Din. He was remarkably close to achieving that wicked goal if not Dr. Shams al-Din stopped them at the right time. Following the advice of her husband, Natasha kept that secret in her chest. Even so, it is boiling like hot water and burning like acid inside her. That ugly sensation gives her restlessness days and nights. Natasha poured hot tears when she understood how her grandfather managed to bear that pain inside him for many years without sharing it with anyone, including his beloved granddaughter. She wondered how he managed to live in the same country and city as the murderer of his wife and daughter without attempting to take revenge on him. Chapter 38. The Mastermind of the Terrorist Attack. The case of the terrorist attack on the Apostolic Church Hall went on and on for 1 year before the RCMP police finalized their investigations and brought the file before the Calgary Criminal Court. The police department knew it could not establish solid evidence against the prime suspect Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din. It seemed that the investigations ended immaturely. The only suspects who admitted their involvement in the attack are Jabir, Sarah, Majak, and Malaika. The police of Calgary believe that none of those 4 suspects is the mastermind planner of the cowardly terrorist attack, but they could do nothing to convict the true culprit. The attack has overseas hands, and those 4 are their operatives in Canada who executed the wicked plot. Although every police officer involved in the investigations believes that the hands of Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din are smeared with the blood of those 550 innocent victims, still none of them could prove it. Such conviction began and ended as a mere belief. The Department of Police knew that no court in Canada would convict a suspect on the ground of a conjecture. Every police officer and reporter know in advance what the outcome of that trial would be. The court would convict those 4 suspects and throw out the case of Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din. That is exactly what happened after the criminal court in Calgary passed its final verdict. The 4 suspects are found guilty and thrown behind bars for 10 years, each, whereas Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din is acquitted and sent to his residence in honor. He is released with the cheering and applauding of hundreds of his devotees from the thousands of the Muslim immigrants. That day, the members of the Muhajirin went around the city with tens of their cars and motorbikes celebrating the triumphant release of their spiritual leader. The joyful celebration has ended by jointly enjoying great meals of delicious dishes cooked by over 100 immigrant women. 25 houses have been used for celebrating the great feast. The Muslim males occupied 14 residences for feasting together, while their female counterparts are given 11 houses for gossiping and consuming the meat of the many slaughtered animals. The outcome of the trial of the cowardly terrorist attack is considered by the public to be a great failure in the part of the RCMP Department of Calgary and the Canadian judicial system. It created righteous indignation in the hearts of the families of the victims. Among all the terrorist attacks which Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din masterminded, that is the only plot which he planned with full knowledge of the high risk involved. In all previous terrorist attacks that he masterminded, he followed a similar pattern of the procedure. He never used terrorists in his attack from a country that his feet touched its soil even once. He never planned a terrorist plot in a place that he was planning to travel to it in future. He never used Muslims in his attacks. And he never carried out a terrorist attack in any Western country. His gross hatred and uncontrollable intensive anger towards the apostate pastor Wahid, the atheist Dr. Shams al-Din, and the apostatized Sudanese girl, Natasha, had forced him to forsake all his earlier tactics and came out with that hasty terrorist attack which almost had condemned him and thrown him behind bars forever. When all his legal and evil means of destroying Pastor Wahid and preventing him from marrying Natasha failed, he began to look for a way to murder him. While he was searching for a safe way to carry out his assassination plan, he came to know that the marriage date between his sworn enemy and the despicable apostate girl was fixed. Suddenly, his criminal mentality was held back, and his terrorist mindset took over. Instead of planning the murder of one enemy, he found that he had the excellent opportunity of slaughtering many infidels. Instead of killing Pastor Wahid alone, he decided to murder the apostatized Sudanese girl, Natasha, and her shameless and useless grandfather, Dr. Shams al-Din. He was determined to turn their wedding celebration into their funeral night. He wanted to destroy them in such a way that every ear heard it would become numb. He decided to make their cruel death example to anyone who would dare in future to forsake the beautiful religion of Islam or reproach the precious name and aromatic biography of his prophet Muhammad. He also wanted to inflict severe punishment on everyone who would dare to attend the wedding of those two Sudanese apostates. Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din drew his terrorist plot before he left Canada and traveled to Eritrea. After he made up his plan, he contacted one of his Muslim Sudanese friends who is living in the city of Toronto and invited him to come to the city of Calgary for important confidential business. That Sudanese man is also a Muslim terrorist and leader of the fanatic Muslim Brotherhood in Toronto. For a long time, that militant leader is trying to convince Sheikh Yasser to join their terrorist network. Sheikh Yasser rejected that invitation and kept a good relationship with that Sudanese terrorist. When the need for such a handyman arose, he contacted him and expressed his willingness to do some business with him. As soon as that leader arrived in a hotel in Calgary, Sheikh Yasser approached him with his terrorist plan of carrying out some deadly attack on a Christian church. He did not disclose the driving motives behind such attack except that those are the enemies of Allah and jihad should be waged against them. He explained to the leader that he had everything in the plan. The terrorist leader is required to supply the bombs and make some contacts in the city of Calgary. The evil leader gladly welcomed the plan and appreciated the genius mentality of Sheikh Yasser. According to the plan, the terrorist leader has to contact a Sudanese couple who are active members of the Muslim Sudanese Brotherhood. He has to convince the Muslim couple of harboring the two suicidal bombers whom Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din promised to provide. Also, they have to contact a Christian couple whom the Sheikh mentioned by names. The duty of the Muslim couple is to bribe the Christian couple and convince them to join the plan. The Christian couple should not be informed about the entire plot. They should be bribed to sell only their wedding invitation cards. Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din had already obtained information that Majak and Malaika have been invited for the wedding of Pastor Wahid and Natasha Shams al-Din. The idea of using the Majak and Malaika cars was not initially part of the plan. Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din would never make such a foolish mistake. It was the Muslim couple, Jabir and Sarah, who had been carried away by the rumor of the importance of the car and its plate number for admission inside the church and decided to use the car of the Christian couple. That serious error later became a strong piece of evidence for the police and led to the arrest of the two couples, Jabir, Sarah, Majak, and Malaika. As he had been instructed, the terrorist leader contacted the 2 members of his terrorist group and convinced them to join the plot. Jabir and Sarah contacted Majak and Malaika with $50,000 cash in their hands and bribed them. At that time, the Christian man and his wife have newly arrived and resettled refugees in Canada. Therefore, they are jobless and depend on the little cash they are receiving from the government of Alberta. When Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din bribed them before and convinced them to spread that nasty rumor about Pastor Wahid's wife and 2 children in Khartoum which almost destroyed his life, he gave them only $5,000. But now $50,000 for them are like 50 million opportunities. They could buy 10 houses in Sudan and give them in rent and live the rest of their lives on the revenues they generate. They also could start the import and export business between Canada and Sudan and become business tycoons in Khartoum. So, for becoming filthy rich, the greedy Christian couple agreed to join hands in that cowardly terrorist plot which led to the brutal death of those 20 innocent police officers and hundreds of the wedding guests. As soon as those initial steps were successfully done, Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din flew out of the country. He wanted to be out of the city when that terrorist attack was carried out. As he promised, his next step is to find and supply the suicidal bombers. He decided to bring them from overseas, not to give the police any clue or lead to the mastermind. He knew that the Department of Police in the West is equipped with all kinds of modern means, which would enable them to identify the suicidal bombers even after they carried out the attacks. Through the DNA tests, social insurance numbers, driver licenses, etc., the police would be able to identify the terrorists even after their martyrdom. The Western police could reconstruct the faces of the Mujahideen even after their bodies were blown in smithereens by the bombs. Therefore, to avoid all those pieces of evidence, Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din decided to bring his terrorist attackers Mujahideen from Eritrea. In that country, the people have nothing to identify them after their death. More than half of the population have no birth certificates. Female citizens exist, from their birth to death, only in the minds of their parents and husbands. Not a single female in Eritrea has a birth certificate or any other official identification papers issued by the government. Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din married the daughter of one of the terrorist leaders of Al-Qaeda branch in Eritrea. That leader has 35 sons and 43 daughters. Every year, he marries more than 20 women. All his children were born and brought up as Mujahideen. Even his daughters were used by other Mujahideen to produce more Islamic fighters. Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din recently sent 5 of his father-in-law's sons to Addis Ababa and carried out devastating terrorist attacks on 2 Western embassies. The father-in-law gladly provided 2 Mujahideen when his wealthy son-in-law came to him with his terrorist plan. Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din paid his father-in-law $10,000 as a ransom for the lives of his 2 Mujahideen who are supposedly on their way to heaven to enjoy their 72 virgins of paradise. The 2 chosen martyrs are cousin brothers. One of them is the actual brother of Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din's Eritrean wife. The other one is a direct cousin brother to the wife. Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din decided to make it a family business because he was worried that the 2 chosen Mujahideen might change their minds when they reach Canada and get carried away by the material comfort of this fleeting life. The second task for Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din was to obtain valid passports and visas to Canada. That task became difficult when he found out there is no Canadian embassy in Eritrea. The nearest Canadian embassy is in the neighboring country Ethiopia. By that time, Sheikh Yasser understood that he had a truly short time left. He had not enough time to smuggle his Mujahideen across the border into Ethiopia, obtain Ethiopian passports for them, and then apply for visiting visas to Canada. He knew that the Canadian embassy in Addis Ababa would not issue a visa to any Muslim man without conducting a thorough inquiry in the background of that person. To avoid such delay, Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din approached a Somali terrorist leader in Asmara who was reputed for his excellent work of forgery. The Somali man agreed to provide Sheikh Yasser with 2 Eritrean passports and 2 visiting visas to Canada to be issued in Nairobi, Kenya. The 2 mujahideen have to fly from Asmara to Nairobi and begin their long trip to Canada. The Somali demanded from Sheikh Yasser $5,000 in advance, and when the mujahideen get their visas in Nairobi, he asked to receive another $10,000. Sheikh Yasser refused to accept that deal. He said to the Somali man he would pay the other $10,000 only after his men arrived safely in Calgary, Canada. The Somali man reluctantly accepted the new deal and in due time provided Sheikh Yasser's men with the 2 valid Eritrean passports and later 2 visiting visas to Canada. To obtain those 2 visas, the Somali man had to bribe 5 Kenyan employees in the Canadian embassy at Nairobi. That is the way the wicked Sheikh Yasser Saif al-Din masterminded and carried out his terrorist attack on those innocent wedding guests in the Apostolic Church Hall in Calgary. He was in bed with his underage 14-years-old Eritrean wife in Asmara when his terrorist men executed that cowardly terrorist attack. As soon as he arrived in Calgary and learned that his prime targets, Pastor Wahid and Natasha, had escaped safely, he considered his plan was a total failure.